Today we're talking about Gigantic again. As some of you may remember, I've already played this game in the past and I've made a video on it, but quite a few things have changed since. The most drastic change here being the release on the Arc client. I will explain what that means in just a second. But first things first, for those of you who have not seen the first video, a quick overview of what Gigantic is. Gigantic is essentially sold as a MOBA, kinda in the same segment as maybe SMITE and Paragon. At the same time, it's not really like that at all. It also has a lot of action elements that are kinda closer to Overwatch or Paladins or any hero shooter really, so it falls somewhat in its own niche. It's fast-paced 5v5 combat with objectives, kind of areas that you need to secure and place creatures on, which kind of act like buildings. You don't have any minions around and you have to take down the enemy core. The arena size itself is relatively large in the beginning, but then shrinks down later in the fight. There are very few downtimes in the game, and I think that's what it's all about. It's about action, it's about fighting, it's about taking points, and all of that in a third-person perspective. Now, Gigantic as a whole has struggled a little bit in the past. It was originally planned to be released by Microsoft through the Windows Store and through the Xbox Store, obviously, but that didn't really work out the way it was planned. Microsoft didn't want the project in the end, and they kind of gave it back to the developer. There were some other attempts here and there. In the end, it's getting released now. Perfect World Entertainment has picked it up. Motiga is still releasing the game or making the game, and that's all you need to know, really. The rest is history. But what's currently happening is the Arc release. Now, originally, Gigantic was basically designed to be bought through the Windows Store, and you could play it between Xbox and PC. That's still the case. But the majority of players, I think, will switch over, because what's coming out currently is the Arc client. The Arc client is its own client from the developers, basically, that kinda, well, works like the Blizzard launcher or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is that this allows Windows 7 and Windows 8 users to play the game. Previously, it was restricted to Windows 10 and Xbox only. It also comes with some other perks, we'll talk about that later down the road. This means there's a whole new untapped audience basically, because a lot of people just don't like Windows 10. The Arc client has been out before, and the version for Gigantic to use there has been available more or less, but you had to have a key, and now it's much easier to get into it. And the game is going to be released soon, and that changes even more, as on the 20th of July we will see the release not only on the Arc client and not only the Windows client, but also on Steam. Now obviously, for many smaller games, Steam is a great platform to get some exposure and to get a much bigger player base. It doesn't work for everyone, but for some games it really worked out pretty damn well. What sucks a bit is that this means that the Xbox players are kind of left out, and the Windows 10 players have to decide if they want to play with the other people on Arc and Steam, or if they want to play with the Windows Xbox players. But oh well. It's supposed to change over time. We'll see if it actually works out, or if Microsoft blocks that somehow. With all these changes and recent developments, I figured it would be time to look into Gigantic once again. I've covered it in the past, I've talked about the pros and cons, but quite a few things have changed here. I've played the game quite a fair bit since, and I thought with this new different perspective, I would like to talk about the game again. Some things will be repetitions from the previous version here, obviously, because some things are still good and haven't really changed, and I will talk specifically about all the changes as well. With that, let's go into the pros. There are some pros that remain the same. The gameplay has almost zero downtime. The downtime is actually even lower now. I will talk about why in just a second, and that just makes it really, really fun. Though it is hard if you ever want to give your brain a bit of a break. I actually felt more exhausted after playing this game than other games that I play. It's harder to stream as well, because you really have to focus on the game at all times. The only game that I could compare to that in action really is Overwatch. Pretty much any other game I play does have less action, it has more downtime in between. The combat system is insanely fun, it feels really fluid, the motions are really fast, there's a lot of mobility, not a lot of stun lock, and I like that. It feels really, really nice. Not much change there, some perks have been adjusted obviously, and some characters have been balanced, but in the end it's still the same idea of how you fight in the game, and that's really, really good. The stamina system has been improved, and this is what comes into play with the downtime. Originally, the stamina was also used up out of combat. Now you do not use stamina out of combat anymore at all. You use more stamina while in combat to make up for that, but this means that getting to the fight is easier. You can just sprint all the time and use your abilities to get there, which is really, really nice and feels really, really good. Sometimes it's hard to tell if you're still in or out of combat, but that's a minor downside here. The graphics and animations are as good as ever. The game looks really nice, has really good optimization, and it just has these really nice visuals, this really nice art style. No complaints at all. I think it just looks great, and that's what made me fall in love with this game in the first place, especially in combination with the fluidity and the combat system. The performance is equally nice, no lag at all. Even if you forcibly go onto the servers that are worse for your region, being NA for me, it still runs really well, and you hardly notice that you're playing on another region, which I think is a big plus. The downside here is that the game is 60 FPS locked and will remain so for a foreseeable future. In a recent AMA, Gigantic developers said that they would look into it maybe eventually, but not for quite a while at least. There are the map changes in the long games, nothing changed here, still really nice. You have this big map in the beginning and you have those, well, more extended areas where you fight throughout the area, and then when it comes down to the clash, you have those close combat situations which favor certain characters and makes it very interesting to play the same map in a different style, more or less. Another nice perk over other games is being able to choose your character before the queue. So you click the characters you want to play and then you go into queue. Obviously you can manipulate this because you can still pick another character later, and you can pick a character that is unfavored basically, knowing that you get a queue fast, or just pick all characters. But generally speaking, it's nice to even have this option at all to choose a character beforehand. I think this is very beneficial to avoid as much frustration pre-game as possible. Finding matches has gotten a ton better. I hardly had any levers at all. I hardly had people disconnecting while trying to find a match, and match finding generally was relatively quick as well. I usually had a match within 5 minutes, and you would have 5v5 in that very match, which is really good, considering how that original state of that situation regarding match finding was. Streaming now also works properly, a major benefit from me here. Originally the game did only run with screen capture, which really a lot of people don't like because you basically have to show your desktop when you run it. Now with the R client you can finally stream it through window capture and it runs without any problems. As far as I know, that's still not possible on the Windows version, though it may have changed at this point. That alone, in my opinion, speaks a lot for the R client, for especially anyone who's interested in content creation, because obviously if you can stream it there easier, it's a lot more beneficial. Another plus of the game that I have found now that there's a few more skins is that there are a lot of nice unlockable skins. Even the free ones, basically, the ones that you don't have to pay actual money for, are nice, they look really good, and overall there's a variety of skins, there's a ton of skins given how young the game is, and I really like that. There's also a new tutorial which I think is good. They made some really good improvements on that. It's a bit repetitive if you've already done it, obviously, and they kinda go over things a lot. Then again, the moment you go into a match, you will be thankful for having all this information, because really, the moment you get into a match, it gets kind of chaotic in the beginning if you don't know what you're doing. So, better a little bit too much repetition than too little here. Now for the cons, the downsides. The Founders Pack. The Founders Pack allows you to get 18 heroes, 2 future heroes, 2 limited skins, and the Founder status. The Founders Pack is also on sale now. It is 30 euros instead of 40, so it's cheaper. But in my opinion, it's still not a great deal. Really, in other games you get the whole game or the whole roster of heroes for a set price, and not just a restriction on certain heroes that are yet to be released and not the rest after. I don't know if there will be anything like that after the Founders Pack maybe, but 2 limited skins and the Founders status are not that tempting to make up for it in my opinion. So I probably personally still wouldn't recommend it all too much unless you really feel like you want to have all those heroes right away. The next one is the new HUD, more specifically the new health and mana bar. Originally those were positioned right next to the character, to the left and to the right in this kind of half circle shapes. And they were amazing. I loved them. They reminded me of my World of Warcraft days, where I love this kind of thing where you have your health bar and your mana bar in your peripheral vision at all times. You don't need to look anywhere else during combat if it just comes to your health. I think it's amazing. I think it was a great feature. And now they decided to clean up the interface and put the health to the bottom. And I don't know why. And I wish that they would revert that, and I know that it has been in discussion, but it's not really set in stone yet, and I just wish there was an option to activate it again. I understand that it doesn't visually fit quite with the new UI anymore, but with some updates it should look really good, and I really hope this will be brought back. One thing that is still as annoying as ever is the ability overview in-game. It's really hard to see all your abilities. You basically have to hover over every single one if you want to find out what they do. I get that you're expected to kind of find out the abilities in practice mode, but if you're jumping in with a new character, it would be nice to just have a quick button that shows you all the abilities, which you have in most other games. Usually there's a hotkey that just lists you all the abilities and what they do, instead of you having to go over them one by one. Really not convenient and really not what you want in an in-combat situation, basically, or in a situation where you walk in towards combat and you don't have so much time to hover over everything. Another con that obviously developed, which I kind of mentioned already, is the Arc versus Windows Store version. Now you have to make this decision which of your friends you want to play with, basically, and that sucks. While the Arc version, in my opinion, is generally the better one for PC users if you're not having a lot of friends on Xbox or something. And now for the last and, in my opinion, biggest downsides. This is my favorite topic to talk about in any game, apparently, but it's matchmaking. Now, before you say, Duke, you always complain about matchmaking, hear me out. I did not originally complain about matchmaking in Gigantic. When I first played the game, the matchmaking was pretty damn good. Everyone was kind of new and not too many people knew what they were doing. And if they knew what they were doing, it wasn't ridiculous. That has changed. Obviously, people have kept playing this game and some people have played it for, whatever, the last 2 years and another 6 months on top of that. And originally you weren't matched with those people, or if you were matched with it, you really couldn't tell. But now you can tell. The first game after I came back was a ridiculous stomp where the enemy team, I don't know if it was a coordinated 5-man pre-made or whatever it was, but they just walked over us. And I've had quite a few games like that since, or quite a few games going in the other direction, where you just have a few players that are ridiculously better than anyone else on the map. And I don't quite know what happened there, if something went wrong with the algorithm at some point down the road. Either way, I just really hope that this will be put more into focus, especially with the new players coming in, because those are the ones who are going to go away if they hate the matchmaking and have a feeling that it's not for them at that point. Also, there's supposed to be a ranked mode soon, and by that point you really want to have a very stable matchmaking, otherwise your ranked will just be trash, as it is in many other games. Last but not least, a few neutral points. There's voice chat, apparently, which is nice, but I've never heard anyone use it, so I can't really say anything about it. I wish there was a practice mode that you could use while in queue, because sometimes you really don't have anything to do in the queues, and it would just be nice to have anything that you can do while you're just waiting for your game. Also, it would be really nice if you could change your skins after locking your character in the loading for a game. Generally speaking, aside of the Arc client thing, Gigantic is obviously still being developed, new characters and mechanics are added on a somewhat regular basis. I would say it's generally very slow progress, and there's a lot of balancing that is done over releasing many new characters, which I think is mostly favorable. It's nice to know that there's a lot of concern going into making the game feel nice over pushing out a lot of characters that people will pay for. Also, we know from the AMA that the competitive side of the game will be decided by demand, which I think is really good. So basically, Gigantic will have a more competitive side if the player base demands it. If not, it will remain more of a casual game, and I think that's a very good decision. Listening to the community instead of forcing an esports side onto a game really should help the game's development overall. That's my second impression of Gigantic, so to speak. If you think this game is for you, if you like what you see and what you heard, you should really check it out. I highly recommend it in general. It's a very fun game. Many of the downsides the game has are pretty easily fixable or are not that bad that you can't look past them. So I would totally recommend playing this game and trying it out. Thank you very much for watching. If you thought this was informative or interesting, feel free to leave a like, maybe a sub if you're not subscribed yet. Also, I said I was completely back. Apparently I wasn't. I got sick again, and I also had some uni stuff to take care of. I will be a bit busy over the next weeks or maybe month even, so there will sometimes be a day where I might not be able to upload. Sorry in advance, I hope it happens as little as possible, but this way you at least know. Hope to see you all for the next one tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.